And so this was the third match in the Darkest Days 2v2 historical battle tournament being held by the Total War Centre. The map chosen was Bibracte, I, Cluny the Scourge, and my ally Selifator play the Romans. I was the Julii and Selifator the Senate. Our opponents were Merko and Mr Longbowman, Merko playing as the Gauls, Mr Longbowman as the Germans. When the battle began, the Barbarians sent the Gauls into the woods, and the Germans formed a battle line adjacent to that. We Romans formed a coherent battle line with our legionaries, as you can see there. Senate on the right, Julii on the left, missile units and skirmishers in front, artillery moving up behind, cavalry massed together on the far left. The Romans really do need to keep their cavalry massed in this battle because the Barbarians have the advantage in horsemen. By fighting in and near to the woods, the Barbarians are having a paralysing effect on the Romans' will to advance and bring them to an infantry engagement, because they know that the Barbarians will get a combat bonus if they are fighting in the woods. Here you see that the Romans send their missile troops forward and they begin damaging the German skirmishers, who are positioned in front of the Spear Warbands and other infantry. Those Skirmisher Warbands aren't terribly useful, to be frank, so such casualties aren't all that important to Mr Longbowman. Now you'll notice that the Barbarian Cavalry is separated. The German Cavalry is on the right, and one unit of Gallic Light Cavalry, while the bulk of the Barbarian Cavalry, the mounted nobles of the Gauls, are way out on the left in the woods here. Their intention is to swing those cavalry around the flank of the Senate infantry. Now in a game sense, those cavalry aren't hidden, but because they're in the midst of those trees, while the Roman players are concentrating on the more exposed barbarian units, we simply can't see what they're doing. Now here you see that the Senate are holding off on firing with their artillery because they're still too far back, and a shortfall with incendiary firepots, which is very likely, has a good chance of hitting our own men until those artillery are much closer. Now the Gauls decide to close with their infantry, still within the woods, being very careful to keep hold of that advantage. If we attack them, then we'll have to fight barbarians in woodland. The Foresters have entered a missile engagement with the Roman missile troops, which they are certainly going to win if we allow it to go on for too long, since Forester Warbands are the best archers in Rome Total War. We Romans move our cavalry further out to the left with the idea of creating a menacing effect, which will hold their attention and perhaps create an opportunity we can exploit to attack and destroy those two units of German cavalry, overwhelming them by superior numbers. You'll notice that the German player very carefully keeps them within reach of that German Spear Warband, which set to phalanx formation will provide excellent protection against cavalry if he has to pull back in a hurry. Over on the other wing of the battlefield, the Romans have no cavalry available at all, and they're facing the bulk of the Gallic noble barbarian cavalry. We were trusting in the woods to discourage the enemy from using his horsemen there. We wanted him to fear the combat penalty that cavalry suffer in woods. Things don't work out quite the way we had hoped on that score, however. As you can see, we're using our artillery to try to provoke the Germans into attacking us. A frontal assault will allow us to use massed javelins against them. Now, because the German player needs to keep that unit of Spear Warband available to support his cavalry, it means he doesn't have all of his infantry available to face off against the Julii, who will be able to outflank his Spear Warbands and Axemen much more easily when the time comes. That's a very cautious, very careful deployment by the Germans there. Look how close the Spear Warband is behind that cavalry unit. Now, all the way back over on the left, the Gallic cavalry is still massed together. The Foresters are still firing. So is the artillery. The Roman missile units, as you can see there, the Slingers, and archers are being slaughtered by the foresters. One of us is going to have to break this deadlock. It comes down to a question of whether the enemy fear our artillery more than we fear their foresters. As you can see, I'm sending one unit of cavalry on a wide flanking motion. I intend to strike from the rear when we make our cavalry move to try to envelop the German cavalry there. And finally, the barbarians launch themselves at us. This unit of Axemen here is overwhelmed by javelins and destroyed instantly. Over on the other wing, the Gauls have attacked the Senate, and quite a large part of that battle is taking place in the woods, which doesn't exactly give their infantry an advantage, because early legionary cohorts are still stronger than the Gallic troops, but it certainly gives them much better staying power than they would otherwise have. And that means they can hold on for quite a while, certainly long enough for the Gallic cavalry to swing around the flank there and begin the process of chewing up the Senate infantry one cohort at a time. They're going to roll up that line there. The Gauls certainly have done everything they're supposed to do. Now we Romans finally make our cavalry move. We make maneuvers to try to achieve envelopments, but our goal is to destroy the German cavalry and then roll up the German infantry line, which is already battering itself uselessly against the legionary cohorts, with the exception of the Berserkers, who are after all absolute badasses. Here, this unit of Spear Warband I've been able to envelop with 3 units of legionary cohorts. That's because the other third Spear Warband was unavailable, being separated to give protection against cavalry. Here you see that the German cavalry is already routing. We've achieved a total envelopment, and with the freedom this gives to strike at the rear of the remaining German troops, who are already fixed in place, the German army completely disintegrates. Now it's a question of whether the Julii can rush their forces over to hit the Gauls in the rear in time before they manage to destroy the Senate. They are dealing some serious damage. They're routing Senate troops, seeking envelopments again and again, one after the other. Look at that, beautiful. Achieved another routed cohort there. Now the first of the Julii troops arrive, but the Gallic line isn't thin enough for them to make an immediate powerful impression. They rout 1 unit, but Senate troops are routing 2. This is coming down really close to the wire. Armies are bringing back regrouped units that have routed and been brought back to the battle. Everything is centered now in this one final struggle. Look at this immense multicolored morass here. It looks much like vomit. The last time I vomited, and the cavalry are the chunks. You know, those strange kind of carroty chunks that you always get in vomit, even when you haven't been eating carrots. This was a very dangerous moment. The Gauls have sent cavalry into the rear of the Julii infantry. The Senate complete the sandwich with their own cavalry. No mercy is being shown here. This is a matter of honour and a matter of glory. Now, as I expect you know, when someone dies, their bowels loosen and their bladder opens. So I would imagine that in the midst of that heaving mass, with all those corpses and the sweat and the blood, that the sheer stench must be overwhelming. Naturally, both of the Roman armies have switched off the incendiary option on their artillery. A shortfall into that heaving mass would have been absolutely disastrous. The Gauls are about to send in their foresters to join the melee battle. They're not too shabby at it, and it helps to complete the envelopment of Roman troops on that side of the mass. What I really love about foresters is their ability to defend themselves against cavalry with their spears. With the death of the Gallic general, the tide turns, morale begins to waver in the Gallic troops. All they need is one more hard blow to tip them over the line, and the Senate delivers it with this strike against the Gallic rear. So, the barbarian plan in this battle was sound, I think. The weak point, the point that gave us final victory, was when the Germans launched their frontal assault against the Julii infantry.